Hi everybody, welcome. This is Kate Stern. I'm an independent curator and I have the pleasure of working with the BG Gallery in Santa Monica, California. And we have just curated an online Instagram art exhibition called Art is Love, where I got to, I see that you're on, Dan, and I'm going to call on you in 1 second. Fantastic. I'm just going to introduce you for a second. So I've had the pleasure of getting to invite artists that I follow on Instagram whose work really resonates with me, who I love and who a lot of other people love, in the hopes that between us we will all reach out and be able to raise as much money as we can for the United Way's efforts during COVID-19. So I'm going to bring on our special guest, Dan Winters, whose work I love, and here we go. I'm going to click on you, Dan, and you should be coming on. There you are.
Hey.
Hi there.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so happy to see your face.
Likewise.
In the quasi flesh.
Exactly. In motion, right?
In motion, in movement. And you look like you have a very photographic background. Like this is maybe a background you use when you take some portraits, or no?
My son is studying acting, and I do audition tapes for him periodically. So we just leave this set up. And then when he wants to do an audition tape, we have a lighting set up already for him. So I just sat in his audition space.
How perfect is that? Is your son's name Dylan?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Did you say, is that what you said, your son?
Dylan.
You have photographs of him that I adore, that you've taken, that I can see the love, your love for him in fact, that's part of why I connect to you, to your photos so much. For me, I see so much soul and so much love in them. And when you've posted personal ones, I think you did one on Mother's Day, or maybe of Catherine and of Dylan, and I don't even have to read the text that talks about your love for them, and I see it in the photographs, which is part of why I feel this affinity for you, and like I've known you, even though we're just meeting today.
Yeah, I feel like, images are really successful when you do feel that, when you feel like sort of like compassion and empathy and sort of a love of the subject or a love of the process, a love of the medium, they all feed into, the pictures that really work. I mean, they don't always work, but the ones that really work, I think those elements need to be a part of those ingredients need to be a part of that image for successful, because it translates. Viewers, they get it. We have sophistication in our ability to like navigate imagery. Society does in general. So yeah, it's good when it works.
It works. I would say it works kind of all the time for you, but probably inside you weigh certain ones as more successful, or you really captured the person, right, versus others.
Yeah, I think so. And, there are factors, obviously, when we're doing portraits as well, like that are beyond our control, but it's definitely like, I think I strive for it. A lot of times I use like a baseball analogy with photography, which is like, you swing for the fence every time. You don't always hit a home run. Those are rare, honestly. Like home runs are rare.
I'm sure.
Honestly, in a photographer's career or journey, if it's a very rich medium, it's been around for quite a long time, 1826 arguably. So to make a contribution that's been around that long, with so many billions literally of images out there, to make a contribution, maybe one or two images that are significant within that discipline, I think is a difficult thing. And I think a photographer that can make those contributions, I feel like, is maybe a success within the medium.
And do you feel that internally?
I think, it's hard to say. I mean, I know images really well, and I've studied the history of photography extensively, and I know many seminal images throughout sort of photography's history that were you know, I really love the 1890s to like 1920. I love that period because there was a pretty big shift. But Stieglitz is, you know, hands down like my favorite photographer ever. And I show people sometimes Stieglitz images, and they question like, well, why is that? Like, why do you think this is such an incredible image? And it's like, it's an incredible image for multiple reasons. It's an incredible image because no image like it existed at that time. Right. And so it's really forward thinking, and he was really onto something that he worked. And secondly, you know, you still have to have a cathartic, I think, connection to it. And,
experience, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like anything, you know, succeeds or fails. You know, we were just talking about Siskel and Ebert and Blue Velvet, right? So one of them hated it, the other one loved it, and it's like they're watching the same exact thing, and how can you walk away with it with two completely like polar opposite takes on the thing?
And
so,
did they do a dual review? You know, I love it, I hate it review.
Yeah, they were together. This is back, you know, Blue Velvet came out in like 85, I think.
Right.
So 85 or 87. So it was a contemporary review when they were still, you know, working together.
Oh no, but I meant, did one talk about why he loved it and one talk about why he hated it?
Oh yeah,
in
absolutely.
the same review? That's so great.
So yeah, so one of them felt like it was gratuitous and there was like nudity and violence when there didn't need to be and this and that. And the other one was like, are you kidding me? The film's texture, the fear that you felt the entire time was based on the urgency and sort of the risks that the main character was taking.
Right.
You didn't have, you know, it's like anything. If you don't have love, you don't have hate. If you didn't have that sort of dire situation, the audience wouldn't have felt compelled to like root for the, you know, protagonist. So I don't know. But you hope that, you know, I hope that I touch people. I mean, it's my hope that I oftentimes. And I think one thing that's interesting about doing photography commercially and doing personal work is that I had a photo instructor that said it was either photo credit or photo blame, depending on right. But the other thing, the difference between an amateur photographer and a professional photographer was that the professional photographer, it was compulsory that he bring back an image every time. So you really have to learn how to make images in, you know, varying situations. Yeah, we don't always have, you know, I know we talked about the photo shoot with, or we highlighted the portrait of President Obama in the, for the show. And, you know, I did 6 full sets with him in 9 minutes. And
9 minutes.
Yeah, 9 minutes. Yeah, we were given 5 and I pushed it to 9. He gave me 4 extra minutes. And, we prepped for 6 hours. We had redundant lighting setups. We had, everything was marked. All the exposures were set. So that skill, you know, I think that's one thing too about being a professional photographer, like the skill required and the command of the craft that's required.
You have to have it all down. And
yeah, you can't just go in and say, oh, I don't know, maybe stand over there or whatever. It's like, it doesn't work, you know. I'm photographing Dylan. I can take as much time as I want. We can have a beautiful exchange with one another, you know. I remember having this epiphany with him when he was growing up where I dreaded driving him to school because I'd have to get up early and, you know, leave. And sometimes I remember days when I was just like, oh, I don't want to do this. And I had this weird epiphany. We were driving and we were having this great conversation and I dropped him off and I thought, that's one less half hour I get to spend with my sons.
Right.
And it shifted. It never was a chore ever again. It was just like, great, I get a gift, you know. And so, you know, we hope a little bit of that comes through in the photographs as well. But
you know what, Dan? My father, who was an incredible photographer, not by profession, he was a writer by profession and director, but an incredible photographer. And he used to follow us, my brother and I, around with the camera, and I hated it.
Yeah.
Let me say this. I hated seeing photos of myself. And yet, as a child, at a certain point, I went, wait a minute. My father wants to spend his weekends photographing me. This is my daddy time. This is my connection. And though, I mean, and everything was blown 8x10. We had proof sheets of everything, the negatives, everything's marked. And then my mother would file them. So there's thousands, and it would say something like Katie, kindergarten, yet, da, 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 da. And you read the back, and I thought, why are they writing all this? Isn't she going to remember when this is? And now, as an adult, even before my father died, I mean, I have, forget that it sounds for hundreds of pictures of myself, but what they represent to me is my father's love, my father's eye, how my father saw me. And now that he's gone, and he was my favorite human being ever, I have this record, you know, and you've been very kind, because when I post them for Throwback Thursday, those are always ones that you like, or you'll write a little note with. And now I say, this was it. This is my father's love for me, you know, through that he expressed through photography.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. In fact, there was a point in Dylan's life as well where he kind of like lost interest. When he was real young, it was fine. Once again, it was kind of daddy time. And I remember really distinctly, and I remember it because I remember the picture that came out of that day. But I remember him saying, can I charge money? And I said, I said 20. I said, you know, it's the best $20 I ever spent. And that was it was very short lived. I think I only paid him maybe for 2 sort of. But
by the way, your son just sent you a little, can you see it? A little crying, happy face. Hi, Dylan.
Hey, buddy. Hope you're doing well. But I remember distinctly something happened, and that was I did a lecture at Aperture in New York, and I finished my talk with probably 15 of the photographs of Dylan, because I kind of went from sort of like commercial work, what I'm more known for publicly, to stuff that's like more closer to the heart. And after the talk, so many people kind of swarmed him. And he told me after, he said, I realized like it's significant that I have this, you know, I have my entire life in photographs, you know, and not only sort of like snapshot documentation, but in stuff that's very mindful and, you know, sort of thick. And so I think that was kind of a cool moment for me as a father and as a photographer, because yeah, I did choose him as a subject, and I stuck in there with him as a subject, you know, so.
Well, let's talk for a moment for people who I'm going to just tell what we're doing here together, and then I'd love to go back to this more personal conversation too. So there's an art exhibition that Dan is a part of called Art is Love, and it exists on Instagram here on the BG Gallery page, and we are raising funds for the United Way's efforts during this pandemic. On Saturday, we had somebody come on from the United Way, and I learned so much in the 10 minutes that they're in 1,400 countries. I mean, on the ground in action. And I remember saying to the woman we spoke with, this must have, when everything started happening, it must have felt like a tsunami, but a tsunami all over the world. You know, how does one organization, how do they handle this? How do they help when it's that broad? And she gave us, I would have wished I had reached out to her to ask her what about Austin, but she was telling us in which cities certain things are prevalent, and that here in Santa Monica, for instance, the homeless population is one of the most deeply affected. They can't get help, so they're on the grounds helping the homeless population. And then she said in Boston was the same thing, and she sort of targeted different areas in this country, in that country, in India. And you think of it, and it's just this, you know, phenomenal when I put my head in what not only what we're all experiencing, but what those that are trying to help, however many humans can handle and take on that kind of crisis. So our part here is to try and sell artworks, and I reached out to artists whose work I know through Instagram and who touch me and who affect me. And when I, even without looking people up, I just made a list in my head. I'm like, oh, I want Dan Winters, I want Johann Deckman, I want, you know, who I wanted, ding, 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 ding. And then to reach out to people I don't know personally, who said yes. So for me, I'm honored and thrilled, and anybody, we'll talk about the photo that Dan put in of President Obama, and that piece is available for sale through this page here on Instagram or through the Instagram.shop.com site. So do you happen to have that print with you?
I made a stack.
Do you just happen to have that with you, handy?
Look at that. There it is.
Yay, what a beauty. So I wanted to tell you, Dan, when we were writing, I was writing back and forth with Catherine over, which photos to use. And in my gut, I thought I wanted Obama. For me, we won't get too political, but he's so the antithesis of our president now. And I thought a lot about where we would be and how we would feel, at least how I would feel, if it was Obama coming on the news every night and talking us through this experience or at the helm. And when I sent the different choices to the gallery director, I was in love also with the hands, with your Obama's hands, but it was very artful, and I thought, okay, so as an art exhibit and as a curator, I'm very drawn to that photo, but you won't know right off the bat that it's Obama's hands. And so I sent both to and I said, here's the cat, and he said, oh no, looking out the window, he said, the first thing I felt was comfort. And I said, okay, that's what we need. That's what we need right now is comfort. So tell me about that, your 9 minutes, but that experience, and do you get to know each other at all in that short time, or?
Well, I'd photographed him for Time Magazine 2008. So right at the beginning of his tenure in office, and then that was in 2016, shortly before he left. So I had a really interesting, we did one photograph it's easy to see online. It went real viral, but it was a tight headshot of him in 2008 and a tight headshot of him in 2016. And you could see sort of the wear and tear that the office brought on him. So when I photographed him in 2008, we had 20 minutes. And we used about 15, and I felt like I'm not real greedy with regards to time. I work pretty fast. So I actually got to know him better in 2008. He remembered the 2008 shoot when I went to shoot him in 2016, and he had a kind of a joke about the photo I did of him then, and because it was a tight headshot, he's like, oh, you're going to take a picture of my head again. And I said, yeah, I'm going to recreate that shot with the exact lighting, the exact focal length lens, etc. But I have all this other stuff to do today too. So to be honest, when you're shooting, I had someone right behind me in my ear counting off minutes. That's a minute, that's 2 minutes, that's 3 minutes. So I had a sense of like where I was in terms of, could I take a little bit more time here? Should I rush through this one or whatever? And I wanted to make the reason I wouldn't have wanted so many setups, but I was shooting it for New York Magazine, and it was an entire issue devoted to Obama. So they needed a lot of art, right? So it was a cover, which this image actually ended up on the cover. But it was they needed a lot of artwork. So I had to really like rise to the occasion and kind of like churn out a lot of work. And that's, once again, where it comes back to, regardless, it's compulsory that I come back with images, excuse me. And this was the last picture that I did. And this is the only one that we shot available light. The other ones were all lit. And it's funny because at the White House, you can't put a tripod leg or a stand leg on the carpet unless you lay down this 6-inch or 8-inch square piece of carpet so that there's no dents, and we had probably, 30 or so lights and probably about 45 or 50 stands. And we had 5 tripods and, 5 cameras. There were squares of carpet everywhere. So we were getting updates from his team, time updates, because he was walking from he had just had to walk down the hallway from the Oval Office to the Blue Room, which is where this is. And they said, okay, he's 5 minutes out. So I went over here and I figured out the exposure for this shot. It's a tricky exposure because you're looking into a bright sunny day, but we're inside of a dark room. So it's a very fine edge that you have to walk on so that you don't blow the outside out and you don't underexpose the inside.
Right.
So I set the exposure and put the camera down on a piece of carpet, square, so that it was all ready for me. So when I got to that point, I just would pick it up and shoot. And he got in place. I kind of put him in place, and I went and grabbed the camera and I shot a frame, and it was completely overexposed. It was just almost white. And it was interesting because I reverted to when I started out as a newspaper photographer, where a lot of times I had to guess exposures. Right. And I got good at guessing exposures. And I was like, okay, it's 5/6 at 125th. And I set it and shot it, and it was right on the money. And while I was setting it, he said, I don't hear any clicking, Dan. And I said, hold on, I got it. But it turns out what happened was my wife had texted my assistant and said, take behind the scenes photos of Dan shooting. So he had grabbed the camera, reset the exposure, shot it shooting, and then didn't think to like put it back, just sat on the carpet away from it. So that was a hectic moment. This is by far, I think if I think about, we talk about significant images, this is, to me, there's a historical significance to this photograph, and I think that's been recognized, and that makes me happy because once again, it's difficult to make new images of someone so widely photographed, you know. So there's a definite pride I have in a particular photograph, for sure. I love that that the glass, it's difficult to see, but the glass is, you know, it's vintage poured glass like the White House had initially. So it really distorts the Washington Monument. You can see all the distortion.
And it's rounded, isn't it? I'm looking at the photo on my computer. Is that window rounded?
Yeah, it's very subtly rounded, yeah.
So that adds something. Does that change the way?
If I were lighting, it would, but because I wasn't lighting at all, it wasn't a problem. You know, a lot of times with glass, especially rounded glass, you know, it's very hard to hide your light without getting like a big reflection in the thing. And there's a whole skill level about how to do that, how to hide lights and where lights can go and what works and what won't work. But this one was, like I said, it's the only one we did available light, and definitely like my favorite from, and it ended up being the cover of the issue, so that made me happy.
Well, I'm glad I chose your favorite. I didn't even know.
It's funny, I tend to overthink things sometimes, and I remember, it's really funny because I look at it now, it's so obviously Obama, but I remember showing the ticket agent at the airport on the way back from DC to Austin. I had exported a file onto my phone of the image, and I started to feel a little bit insecure, like people are going to know this is Obama, right? You know, and I overthink.
So you showed the ticket agent?
And, you know, and I was like, okay, it worked.
I love that. Well, and as I said, the gallery director said, and from the back, you know, oh no, that comforted me. You know, you didn't have to see his face.
Sure.
And there's something hopeful about him looking out and longing and hopeful and I don't know, it's a beautiful. Will you hold it up one more time for anybody that kind of joined later? This is the photo that we're talking about and the one that's available. It's a size, I think it's 20 by 30. Does that sound right? 20 by 30, and you can purchase it through our page here on Instagram at BG Gallery or the bggalleryshop.com. So I was texting with David last night, your producer friend.
Yep.
We were texting, and I said to him that, because he asked me, did I want you to have any other photos available? And I said, what I would love, and if this was, I think it got relayed to you, is any photos that, when I say the word your favorites, I mean that resonate with you, Dan, as you know, as a person in your life and this and that, versus, and maybe, and also it could be as a photographer, but are there ones that stand out? And if you've got those, would you show them to me? And I'd love to know why that photo.
Yeah, I have a few that are important to me only because I feel like there were breakthrough moments or there were subtleties that I never did before. Now, I would usually be inclined if you framed that question to me yesterday before I pulled the images together, I probably wouldn't have pulled any of my images. I probably would have pulled historical images that I love.
So I'm
Yeah.
glad. It's what I want. It's exactly what you're doing.
Oh, well, okay. So the ones I pulled are ones of mine that I think in one way or another.
That's okay. I want to talk to you about your personal
Good.
photo.
So,
Yeah.
well, this is, okay, so the first one I pulled was, it's a portrait of Helen Mirren, and I did it for the New York Times Magazine. And I'll show you that.
Oh, what a great background. Where is that?
So it's a set.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, we built that in Culver City at
Wow.
Smashbox. And that's one reason I feel like it was successful to me. It was in 2006, I think, when she did The Queen, which was mine. And I really wanted to do something that felt like we were in some atelier in Paris, and it was this kind of amazing artist space that when you walk had a complete like reaction to. But of course, that doesn't exist in LA or Culver City or anywhere. And I was fortunate enough that the Times was willing to pay for it because it was an expensive set. But we built that over a 2-day period at Smashbox Studios in Culver City. And kind of a really satisfying moment was when Helen came in and she saw the set, and you could just tell she felt so honored that we went to such effort, that she said, I hope I can do this justice, which was kind of a beautiful sentiment. We had a couple $1 million worth of diamonds on hand, and we ended up using only a brooch that the stylist had purchased at the Rose Bowl flea market for $20.
Let me see. Now, by the way, sidebar, one of the stylists you work with is somebody I do dog rescue with, which is Nicole.
Nicole. Yeah, yeah. Sure. Yeah, I work with her a lot.
Nicole and Tom, yeah.
Yeah, Nicole's my favorite. She's actually one of the people.
I mean, they're sweet. Do you know her husband, Tom, too?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm very big into dog rescue and volunteer with an organization, Mutt Scouts, that they came in with. And so when I first got into dog rescue, I spent quite a bit of time with them and dogs. Mm-hmm. That Helen piece, part of what I love so much is the elegance, which obviously was intentional, I assume, the elegance of the dress, her own elegance, and then the rawness of what, looks like a painter's studio, right? Or something that looks cement, I don't even know, but the windows at that angle and the whole juxtaposition is and it definitely looks like it's in Europe. It doesn't look like it's and
the direction I gave her, and I shot very little of this. I tend to not shoot a lot of frames when I shoot. I've shot more frames shooting digitally. This is shot on film. This is shot on large format film. I would shoot more sparingly then, I think, and a little slower. But with digital, you're not incurring any sort of additional costs each frame you're shooting. So I tend to sort of sketch a little bit more and drift a little bit more. But my direction to her was pretend you're floating across the floor. And I think that
worked.
She kind of nailed it. So that was an important one for me. Commercial, and I only have commercial images here today that I brought. This is one of my favorite actresses, and this is a super simple picture, but I always wanted to photograph her, and she's so amazing looking to me. And it was a pretty quick shoot, and it was just one of those like perfect collaborations. But it's a portrait of Tilda Swinton.
That's a face, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And for me, the success of the photograph is the collaboration between her and giving me that, and which is always the case, and the lighting and everything that supports it, to try to.
She's so haunting, and she looks like a monk in that photo.
Yeah, she's really like kind of alien-esque, and I love that about her. I did this one of Al Pacino because it's really hard to do like hand shots, and I loved how he was willing and worked really closely with me to try to like make this work. But this is a portrait I did of him, and you see he's got his finger around where his other eye would be,
Right.
kind of closing up that little cavity there, which I really loved. And you know, of course, it's also interesting photographing people that I hold in really high regard. You know, I'm really interested in artists and writers, and not really interested in photographing business people or politicians or anything. You know, I tend to kind of live in the sort of artist, writer, kind of dancer, painter world than I do.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think part of why I'm so drawn to your photographs is they have a painterly quality to them. You know, the lighting, the coloring on the faces, and then your backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of photographs you've done. I'm trying to think of one of recently of Tom Hanks when he was doing Mr. Rogers. Different. I'd have to be looking at your page right now, but the backgrounds they look like a painting,
Yeah,
a solid color with like a faux kind of, you know, some texture to it.
Yeah.
The color you're wearing now seems to be a color that appears in the background often.
Kind of my work.
So they don't look, it's not that they look like paintings or photorealism. They're so photographs, but you know that this person, you know that this photographer, also loves painters and painting and art, not just photography. That shows in everything that you do. And I think that's part of why I'm so drawn to your work.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, a friend of mine asked me not too long ago about sort of what makes a good portrait photographer. Is there any sort of specific skill that you could identify that would make a good portrait photographer? And, you know, we're all individuals, obviously. I mean, in my opinion, like, liking people is like a good place to start, but also having reverence for people and honoring them, and the idea that, you know, what you're doing is you're giving a two-dimensional representation of their three-dimensional self for people to see. And so the idea of like, I never have sort of a hidden agenda usually, not really, and I always try to be as reverent as possible to the subject. And I think that's like an important piece, you know. So not only, there's a photographer, Jay Maisel, who I love.
Jay or Jane?
Jay Maisel. In fact, there's a really interesting documentary on him that I would highly recommend on Amazon right now that just came out.
Okay.
It's
you know what? Your voice got cut out, so tell me the title again.
The title of the documentary, my friend Stephen Wilkes made the documentary, and it's called Jay Myself.
Jay Myself. Okay.
And it's fantastic. But Jay said at one point, and it's one of my favorite quotes about photography, he said, if you want to become a better photographer, become a more interesting person. There's so much truth to that. Because,
that sounds like something my dad would have said.
Perfect. Because what we're doing really is we're taking the world that we're presented with, and we're reinterpreting it, and we're giving that to the world, right? So we're completely subservient to material that we can interpret, right? We're not conjuring like a painter can stand in front of a blank canvas, right? We need something to shoot, something or someone to photograph that's in front of our camera, right? So, you know, having a reverence and having a curiosity is certainly a big part of it. Definitely. I have one more.
Fantastic.
I did this because I find that doing funny pictures is really difficult, but when you have people that are genuinely funny, it's a little easier. So I tend to stay away from funny, but like I've done funny with Will Ferrell, and I've done funny with Brad Pitt. Both people are incredible to do funny with, because it's a deadpan funny. It's kind of more like the sort of kind of Step Brothers brand of funny. But this is a really funny person, and I think this is a really funny picture. It's a portrait of Nick Offerman.
I've seen that photo with the steak and
with the steak, yeah. And I think what I love about this picture is that we allowed something to happen that wasn't scripted. And that was the little dog that's come in that's trying to get to the steak was actually the owner had these steaks for Nick to put on his eye as though he were. Yep,
Oh,
am I there?
Yeah, you're freezing though for some reason, but you're back. Sort of, you're frozen.
Okay. Yeah, so we had Nick, we had makeup department do black eyes for him, and we got these really nice steaks for him to put a steak over the eye, very cartoony. But then the little dog was hanging out by the cooler, and so one of the assistants picked the dog up and kind of like started moving it slowly into the frame so it couldn't but it could almost reach the steak. And I swear it's like extending its neck to the point of dislocating vertebrae to try to get to.
And Nick's not even looking. He didn't even blink.
No, not at all. Not at all. He's a total pro. He's amazing. So that was one. So that's my little pile of prints that I put together.
I love your little pile of prints.
Yeah.
I know that, so when I first started following you on Instagram, which is a number of years ago, I looked at more of your work and I played around online, and I went back and did that again yesterday and was trying to refine certain videos of things that I had watched. But you talked I can't remember which something it was, but you did talk about your personal photography and wanting to do more of that and maybe exhibit that. And what I mean by that, I know you know, but for anybody else who's listening, is not necessarily something that you're hired to do and brought in, but what you want to do when you go out there. And I know one of the things you like photographing are bees. Mm-hmm. I have a cousin who's a beekeeper, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
So I just wanted to hear a little more about what you would love to do with the personal work and what you love, what and why you love to shoot certain things.
Well, I think, once again, the curiosity is so important in photography. I think the idea of like seeing something and reacting to it and applying whatever your sensibility is to whatever that subject is. And I tend to be really curious, and I tend to be interested in a lot of things. And so I'm constantly kind of overwhelmed with, well, I could do this, I could do that. So I just always shoot personal work in conjunction with everything else. I mean, I just shoot. And so when I say, I feel like all the work's personal, but when I say personal work, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not being hired to do it. I'm just doing it a love of the craft, a love of the subject. I've exhibited work that we would probably call personal work. I had a show, I guess last year, year before last, at Fahey Klein Gallery, which is where I shot in Los Angeles with David Fahey.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and of personal work in New York, for example, that I'd shot over the past 30 years. So it's all like street photography.
I had known, I could have seen that, yeah.
And so that's been exhibited, and I had a kind of a survey show in Savannah at the Telfair Museum at the Jepson Center for the Arts.
I love it there.
It's retrospective to me means kind of more end of career, so I would call it like a survey because it's kind of mid-career. But there's 120 images, and it was in 3 separate galleries at the museum, and one entire gallery was just personal work, so photography of that giant wasp, of portraits of Dylan and street work and sort of more intimate photography that I would call, photographs of my wife, stuff that's kind of like stolen moments that are kind of important to me. That's
a great title for a show.
Yes.
Stolen Moments.
Yeah, my next book I want to call Stolen Moments. I want to call. But I think that works. It's important to generate that work. And when I look back at my archive, I've always done that. And the idea that I've always done that, to me, has really manifested itself now when I look at the size of the archive. I look at the size of my commercial archive and I look at the size of my personal archive. It's overwhelming. Like how much stuff I've shot for myself is overwhelming. I mean, so many thousands of images. And so that's really satisfying, you know, like there was no reason to make it other than that I wanted to make it. So I do.
Did you used to have a dark room at home?
Yeah, I still have one here at my studio, and I have one at I have a house on Tybee Island in Georgia, outside Savannah, and I have a dark room there. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of, in the darkroom, I've been doing a lot of chemograms, which are sort of chemical paintings. So I use photographic paper and expose it to light and then paint chemistry onto the exposed paper and get these really beautiful abstract like paintings that are absolutely.
When you say paint, are you just moving the paper around in the chemicals, or are you
No.
using a brush? Or?
Yeah, using a brush, using squeegees, using I use plexiglass that I kind of texture, and you know, corn syrup with food coloring in it, all kinds of stuff.
I want to see those.
They're really pretty interesting. Hey, Travis, let's see if Travis can go get me one right now.
Okay.
Hey, Travis, David.
Anybody home?
They closed the door, so I'm isolating.
Okay. Well, sometime maybe you and I, you can just
Where's
share.
Travis? Just ask Travis to grab the chemogram box over there.
Are you okay time-wise, Dan?
What's that?
Are you okay time-wise? Because I don't want to.
Yeah,
I'm
working on this film for a couple of years, directing it, writing it, shooting it, everything. Today.
That's what you were doing last weekend.
Yeah, still.
What is the film?
It's like a dystopic, kind of a dystopic love story. Yeah, it's really kind of sweet. Short film, the festival film, so it'll be 40 minutes. Let's see.
How exciting is that? Good for you. Okay, now we get, what do you call these again? Or what is this technique called again?
There's a proper like portfolio box over there full of chemograms that Jace made. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, the film has been very challenging. You know, it's like any other personal project. You have to do it around everything else. So in some ways, like the COVID isolation has allowed me to do things with the film that I probably wouldn't have been able to do. There's a bunch of visual effects in it. So working with a visual effects guy and really able to devote a lot of time to it. And once again, editing, really able to say, you know, embrace the fact that I'm not shooting. I mean, I shot on Friday and Monday for the New York Times. And yeah, here it is. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Well, I have a question about that before you show. So I wondered about something like that. During COVID, when you have a photo shoot, or even, I don't know if you noticed that maybe one day into quarantine, half the commercials were already COVID related. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how did they pull the actors through? Like, well, how are they shooting this? How are they doing it? And now it's pretty much all, right? COVID, you know, all the languages changed to, you know, in these times, And I thought, well, at least photojournalism, which I know you used to do, that can't stop. So how do people when you're hired by the New York Times, are you are they setting it up so everybody's a certain distance and you're all wearing or
shooting more photojournalistically for them on this assignment? I don't know that anybody's really figured out the kind of like portrait thing yet, because even if I can maintain like a safe distance from the subject, if it's a portrait, you know, there's still hair and makeup and stuff. And so they would have to be in a very close proximity. So I think we're trying to figure it out. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, I hate to say this, but I feel like, you know, we took 2 steps forward and we're starting to take 1 step back now.
I'm right there with you.
You know, you think about this thing as starting with one person. And already in the U.S., more people have died than in the entire Vietnam War already. And this is in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was talking to my doctor the other day. It was a good friend of mine, Ron Bird. And he said, you know, I hate to be morbid about this, but I feel like we're just going to have to we're going to get used to people dying, period. Because you know, until there's a vaccine that looks like it's going to work, you know, I mean, I was in San Antonio the other day, and I was looking for sort of a representative of a kind of a classic American city that had a dead street, and there like wasn't one. It was like business as usual. Antique stores were open. Skateboard.
No.
Oh yeah.
No.
That's what I'm saying. It's like this isn't normal. And I know economically, like people need to get back to work, and you know, you can't have like an economy collapse. But when I go into a Home Depot and I see no one in there, including employees wearing masks,
It's so upsetting. I
me.
mean, now in California, or I don't know, maybe all of California. In Southern California, you now have to. But I was so upset at Trader Joe's at first when they weren't, and I'm my 95-year-old mother's caregiver during all things quarantine, so I have to stay, you know, super safe and all that. And I wanted to bring stuff to have people in the markets put on. You know, I wanted to say, would you wear this, please? Would you please wear this? But you know, it's insane because here in Beverly Hills they opened up not what. You know how it was closed for I'm thinking the word needed surgeries?
Yeah, non-essential.
Now it's cosmetic surgery is okay.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes. And I got a text like, would you like to come in for Botox? And I said, well, I'd love the Botox, but no. And they're like, no, we're practicing safe. We have the assistants, and we're only bringing in a few people at a time. And I said, no, because I think it's wrong. Yeah. It's wrong. But you know, bless you, and I hope you're safe.
You're just contributing. You're contributing to that practice and that behavior, which, you know, obviously is not. You know, I worry that, you know, you do all this work, and like I said, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back, depending. You know, I mean, I can remember a very short time ago hearing the president say that, you know, we have 15 cases, and we're going to get that down to 0 very soon, and we're past the death toll of the Vietnam War.
And by the way, within 20
for me, it's so mortifying. You know, the idea that we're in country for, well, I don't know when the Vietnam War was actually, because it was police action for so long before it was actually like public information. I don't know what they're using as the delineation. 70, we're out of it in 73, 74. We're in it in the mid 60s. So whatever that 10-year period, 8-year period, whatever, that over that 8-year period, we've already passed that in a matter of months is mind-blowing to me. And that's not going to change. It's going to just get worse and worse and worse and worse. So, you know, all you can do is do what you can do, you know, and I think that means when you go to Home Depot, you wear a damn, you know, and it's not, but they talked about, my wife said something really beautiful. She said, it's not for you, it's for people you could affect. And I think if we care about our fellow man in our society,
that's
like
exactly how I feel.
Do, you know, and not sort of point fingers at the government saying like, we're being told to do this and that, these are our liberties, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, don't be selfish. It's a selfish gesture to not want to participate, period.
That's how I feel.
So anyway, all right, you want to see some chemical paintings?
I do.
All right, let me see what I got here.
Thank you, by the way, for spending this much time with me. It means I'm just blown away. So thank you for this.
No, it's a good day for that. So I'll just show you a few of them. I have like 200 in front of me right here, but they're pretty interesting. And it's interesting because when I first started doing it, I felt like it was really unpredictable, and I've done so many of them, and it's actually very predictable, which I love. There's still like a lot of magic that happens, but I figured out a whole bunch of techniques to where they're actually really cool. So this one,
I'm excited to see them. Has anybody seen these before? Is this?
I had several of them in the museum exhibition. I think I had like 8.
Okay. Oh, wow. Do you want to know what I see? If this was like a Rorschach test?
Yeah, what?
I see a Brazilian or Cuban woman dancing with fruit on her head.
Nice. Carmen Miranda. Very good.
Yes, I see Carmen Miranda.
I'll tell you, I'll title that one Carmen Miranda.
Okay, perfect. Oh, wow. This is just beautiful.
And these are a lot of fun to make because it's the tonal quality of the prints is really spectacular when you see the actual print because the paper is so rich with silver and so luminous. And
What kind of paper are you using?
I use Ilford multigrade warm tone, which is my favorite. But
want to know what I see there?
What?
Definitely a bridge, possibly San Francisco. Now I know, of course, these aren't. I'm just saying, in my Rockford test, with the lamp posts that they're going to install about to go up.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So we're under a bridge, and here's the tower, right?
Okay.
The cable. Is that right? Is that what you that way?
And then you see this circle, kind of in the center. Okay, you're so close. Bring your finger straight up. Yeah, right, that one. That's the lamppost upside down before they lift it up.
Oh, they got to raise it. Okay.
They're gonna raise it.
I'll buy that. Yeah, they're definitely full of possibilities. And let me see what else I have here.
Are they all black and white?
Yeah, it's all black and white. There's a really talented Russian artist called Tatiana Gulinka. She's on Instagram.
I know who she is.
And she does color.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
Really, yeah, but I'm a fan of black and white. The thing I like about black and white is working in a black and white darkroom is that you're in a color darkroom. It's pitch black. There's no safe light. It's just black. So you expose the paper, you put it in a processor, or you tray develop, but it's all in full darkness. So you can't see the print as it's coming up out of the water. And for me, the first time I was ever in a darkroom, I was 9 years old, and it was my friend Kenny's dad, who's a photographer, and he had a darkroom at his house. And that was the first exposure I had. Oh, I like this one a lot. I like these too.
By the way, the last one, because I like telling you what I think I see.
Yeah.
The last one was a boat in maybe Thailand with the people in it were workers with lots of fruits and vegetables.
Okay. I don't know what you see there. These are kind of a pair. This is a wave, obviously.
Okay.
Maybe not.
I see the wave. The last one I saw a campfire.
A campfire. We're psychoanalyzing you in this book.
I was going to say, will I be dubbed insane, or you think they'll let me go outside, or
yeah,
lock me up?
I think as long as you wear a mask, you'll be fine. Anyway, so there's
they're so beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, and
well, that's a whole show in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm working on a book. I'm not sure if the whole book is going to be these. I think it might be a combination of several things, but I might just do a book of that. But I have some other bodies of work that are similar in the fact that they're like amorphous like this, that I think all live together really well. This is my friend Brett, who I love with all my heart. He passed away a couple years ago. This is his hand.
Oh wow, that is exquisite.
So that's kind of a combination of a chemogram. Well, I guess it's all a chemogram.
It looks like I don't know why I'm seeing things in everything you show me. It looked like in the center of his hand there's a heart. Not a heart shaped like this.
Right.
An actual heart if you cut something open.
Yeah, I see that. Actually, I see that now. Yeah, that was one of those ones where he put his hand in the chemicals and then put it on the paper and then lifted it off, and then we developed the paper, and then the handprint came up, and then other stuff on the paper that I laid down on the paper when I made the exposure. They're kind of like, technically, if you're doing a photogram, you are laying something onto the paper and then exposing it to light. So Man Ray was great at that. I think Otto was really good at those. Rodchenko was brilliant at photograms. And those were when objects were set on the paper, exposed, and then the shadow. So they also call them shadowgrams. So these are kind of a combination of photogram and chemogram. They're chemical painting, but there's a photogram element to them. So anyway, it's a lot of fun.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking at, in about 3 minutes, Instagram cuts us off.
Okay.
Because there's a but don't go yet.
Okay.
Two things. In watching a video on you yesterday, and again, I don't remember which one it was. There was something you were talking about, and you almost started to cry, and you said, I may cry," and then you said something like, "I'm a total mush bunny. I sob in American Idol," and I said, and out loud I went, "I sob in American Idol too." And I was like, "I love this man." So I have to. Are you watching this year?
No.
Oh.
I would watch it when my wife would watch it, and I'd literally be doing something else. I'd walk through the room, I'd stop and sit there and like start sobbing. And then it's just like, don't we? I mean, the thing, as cheesy as American Idol might be perceived as,
I love it.
The thing about it is, what we're watching is people put themselves out there. And when anybody puts themselves out there, we feel their own vulnerability and the idea that they're trying to overcome that.
Oh, sorry, go on.
It's beautiful. I think that's why you react to it. That's why it's so popular, because here are these people that have come from disparate backgrounds and they're coming together. There's a beauty to it, There's a beauty.
There's two contestants, and they're doing it in quarantine from their homes. And there's two contestants this year who are now in the finale, which is on Sunday, and they will, you, Dan, go right to your heart. Exactly what you're saying. One is named Just Sam. It's a girl who grew up raised by her grandmother. Her mother was in jail her whole life, and she lives in Harlem, and she's here, and she's not with her grandmother because she didn't want to go back and possibly get her grandmother sick, so she's alone in an apartment in LA where she's not from. And another is a guy who's overcome incredible drug addiction named Dylan. Their voices are phenomenal. Their story, I was going to say, oh, we can cry together. But if you watch, and then last but not least, I just want to say once again to you, Dan, and to everybody that's tuned in. Hopefully, Dan, you'll be able to go back when we hang up, you can save this to your stories. So many people are writing you, and many of them are people I can tell by what's flying up there. So you might want to save it to your stories and then go back and see all these beautiful notes you're getting from people in your life that are coming up. But I wanted to say once again, the beautiful portrait of Obama. Tell me the title again, something out the window. What is the title of?
Sure. Usually when I title something, I just describe what it is so I know.
Okay,
yeah, probably.
Let's call it Looking Out the Window.
Yeah, okay.
But it has a great title. But that photo, anybody who's watching, I know Dan would be, and I would be at BG Gallery, and certainly the United Way. So grateful if you purchase that photo. It helps out artists, which I love, and it helps out galleries, which I love, and it helps out the United Way, who are on the ground in 1,400 countries battling this right now. So you can, again, purchase that on the bggallery.com shop, bggalleryshop.com or bgshop.com, or directly through our Instagram page. And then it says it's going to cut me off in 1 minute and 45 seconds, Dan. So I just want to tell you that truly this means the world to me. And I had a great time writing with Catherine and just writing back and forth. And I just feel like I was very touched. You put on your post out today, I'm speaking with my friend Kate Stern, and I started crying. So, because I'm a mush bunny too. But I love you and I appreciate you. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking this much time with me.
You bet. Thanks, Kate.
Okay. Take care. Stay safe. Hug your son and your wife for me.
I will.
Okay.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.